Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us for another AW Author Chat. I'm Lisa White, Associate Manager, Marketing and Publicity at Albert Whitman and Company. I'm so excited to sit down and chat today with Madison Moore, the author of More Than Just a Game, The Black Origins of Basketball, a brand new picture book that will be published this September from AW. Thanks so much for joining me, Madison.
Hi, Lisa. I'm so glad to be here.
Now, first off, I'd love for you to tell us briefly what your book is about.
Sure, yeah. So, like Lisa said, my book is called More Than Just a Game, The Black Origins of Basketball. And it is a nonfiction picture book that kind of celebrates basketball from a Black perspective. So, I'm just going to give you a quick little summary of kind of the history that we're covering. So, basketball was invented in 1891, and it was originally a very popular sport, but it was in only white communities. It was invented by a white man, and this was the time of segregation. So Black communities didn't have access to the sport until about 1904, when it was brought to Washington, D.C. by a gym teacher, a Black gym teacher, who kind of shared it with his students. And it started to catch on, but there were still a lot of obstacles, like finding space to play. This, it was kind of a make or break moment for the sport, but it ended up being kind of a perfect moment because Black musical styles like jazz and blues were becoming really, really popular, and lots of ballrooms and dance halls were opening up. And so in big cities, people who wanted to support basketball started opening up these dance halls early for people to play, and they would advertise it as, basketball and dance, like come and dance and socialize with your friends and play basketball and then stay for the music. And so basketball became part of a larger kind of community event and part of this cultural movement, and it kind of just took off from there. And so over the 1920s, the 1930s, these really dominant Black teams called the Black Fives started playing. And they were amazing at basketball. They won unheard of numbers of games. They drew big crowds. Eventually they started playing white teams, and they would beat white teams that had been playing professionally for years. And so, they kind of just overcame every obstacle that was in their way to become the best players in the sport. So that when the NBA formed in 1949, it was formed as an integrated league because they couldn't ignore that the best players were Black players. And so, yeah, the book kind of carries over through that whole history, gives some specific shout outs to players and teams just to talk about the legacy that made basketball what it is today.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like the book is called More Than Just a Game. I think it's really great to kind of share, like you said, this huge culture evolution that a lot of people don't know the sport had pre-NBA.
Yeah, certainly. And it's still connected to those things. And so knowing where it came from is something that's really exciting to me.
Exactly. So, what inspired you to write your book, and how did you first get interested in the topic of basketball?
Yeah, so it's kind of hard to pinpoint a very specific moment that started me on this project, but basketball has always been a little bit a part of my life. I didn't play myself, but my dad played in college, and both my sisters played in high school, and my brother played. I did gymnastics, so I didn't really have an off season for basketball. But even when I was a kid, there were always just other kids like my neighbors playing in our cul-de-sac and stuff like that. So it was always kind of a part of my life. And I was starting to think about the histories of basketball and the history of other sports, because I was thinking about how both the NBA and the WNBA are it's like 75% people of color. But I knew basketball had been invented by a white person. And so I was kind of thinking about that discrepancy. And I wanted to know, what's the story, where the story was there, how did we get from where basketball started to where it is today, because I knew there had to be something really interesting there. So I started researching, and I found this super compelling history. It just immediately kind of grabbed me. And I was also writing at the same time as the NBA bubble season in 2020. So I hadn't watched that much professional basketball. I like watching basketball in person, but I wasn't that big of an NBA fan. But during the pandemic, when the bubble season was going on, I was very much, keyed into that tournament. I think a lot of people were. And it was also, during the same time as a lot of the Black Lives Matter protests and everything. So it just felt kind of like a perfect storm to energize this story for me. And yeah, it all came from that discrepancy of, what history happened to get basketball to where it is today. And then how could I tell that story for young readers?
Yeah, definitely. And I love that it kind of had that overlap last year because there was so many basketball players and sports figures that made their voice very known. And when it came to everything with Black Lives Matter and the cultural moment that we were going through, and it was definitely more than just being a basketball player.
Exactly, exactly. And it just felt like a perfect example of how that legacy continues today and how important it is to, recognize that history because it's something that we're building on as we move forward.
Definitely. Now, More Than Just a Game is your debut as an author. Congrats.
Thank you.
What was the process like writing this book? And was there something unique or memorable you learned from the experience of writing your first book?
Yeah, it was so fun. Like, obviously, this was very research based. But as soon as I started learning and reading about this history, I was just really drawn in, and I felt like the story was being told to me. And really, I just had to, kind of process, like, I had to go through this process to shape it into something that would be really entertaining and accessible and fun for kids in the same way that it was for me as I was learning it. And so just, trying to connect with young readers in that way was something I hadn't really done before. Like I had been a reader of literature for kids, but never a writer. So that was just like a new perspective to take on it. And, like I said, I was doing a lot of research. I was working with this foundation called the Black Fives Foundation, which their founder, Claude Johnson, he and I did a lot of talking when I was in the writing process. And, the research that foundation does was so impactful for me. And so I wanted to be able to translate some of the amazing history that they have stored as well. And there's also a segment in the book that I think is really special in the back matter, which is kind of a continuation of the Black Fives Foundation mission, which is that they try to get Black Fives players who were maybe left out. They try to get them enshrined in the Basketball Hall of Fame, which is, I think, a really worthwhile way to get people to learn who these players were. And so in the back of the book, we kind of highlight a few players that they're also currently advocating for. And so, yeah, kind of discovering the connection and making that connection with Claude Johnson was also just a really wonderful part of writing the book. And yeah, I'm also wearing my Black Fives shirt today, which they have a sponsorship with Puma, and they have a whole line of Black Fives gear out, which is so cool. So
Awesome. That's
yeah.
awesome for sure. Now, you mentioned the Black Five Foundation. Can you tell viewers a little bit about their foundation? Like you said, the work they do trying to get players into the Hall of Fame, but what else they kind of do and what their mission and their work is?
Yeah, they are sort of a just the hub for everything Black Fives. They have profiles on every team that played, which includes photos and logos. They have a timeline with photos and gear of like what players were wearing at this time and where they were competing. And they walk you through everything from that first gym teacher that brought the game to Black communities all the way up to the time when the NBA is being formed. And they go into specific detail about certain players, et cetera. And they're all under this umbrella of trying to get these players and their legacies to be recognized, both by the NBA and by the general public, and just for other people to kind of share how much of an impact that history has on today. And yeah, like I said, they have a fan shop and they have gear and you can support them in that way. But yeah, they're it's really amazing that the work that they do.
Yeah, that's some incredible and important historical work that they're doing
Yeah.
for sure. Now, talking about the book itself, I wanted to kind of share with readers if you could kind of give a sneak peek or share your favorite spread or page from the book.
Sure. I can go ahead and share my screen real quick.
Yeah, let me turn that on there.
Okay. So, can you see that all right?
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, it's a little bit difficult to pick my absolute favorite scene, so I might give you a little peek of a couple if that's
Because
okay.
couples, it's like picking a favorite child for authors, so I totally understand.
Exactly. But this first one I really love. Well, one, I love the colors. It feels so dreamy. Just Lonnie did just this amazing job of creating a whole book of illustrations that are full of motion and also kind of have this like nostalgic and historical feel. So these are two Black Fives teams, which I love seeing them, compete and excel against each other, and seeing their uniforms, their logos, and seeing that they did draw crowds. And just, yeah, I love the energy of this spread, and it's definitely one of my favorites. I also love this spread, which is an illustration of one of the dance halls when dance and basketball were kind of united together at the beginning. I just feel like the colors in the spread and the energy of it is just so nice, and picturing how this kind of translates into a basketball game feels so natural. So I love this spread. And then finally, yeah, the colors, oh, they're wonderful.
And you could almost like feel like the smokiness of the dance hall and like the sweat and like the feeling
Yeah.
of being in that kind of space.
Yeah, his atmosphere is just really perfect in this book. And yeah, just this other last one. So the book kind of starts and ends with like modern or contemporary players, kids. And that's where, who this book is for and the legacy that this book is impacting. And so, celebrating the people out there playing right now, whether it's in gyms or on the big screen or in on blacktops and playgrounds and whatever it is. Yeah, I think that that's really crucial to this book too. So this is definitely one of my favorite spreads.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing those. I love to give viewers a little peek, especially when we're talking about books that aren't going to be out for a few more months. It's always nice to get to see what they can look ahead towards.
Yeah, certainly. And yeah, just like I have this here, and just being able to hold it and see all of it's really a magical feeling to have this. So I'm glad I was able to share some of it.
For sure, a lot of readers never realize like how long somebody works on a book and how many people and how much work goes into it. So it's a really, I think everyone gets giddy who works on a book when they finally get to hold the final copy, from author to editor to even us in marketing. We get very excited when the books arrive.
Yeah, when it goes from like computer screen to in your hands, it's just kind of a crazy transition.
Very surreal. Now, while researching and writing more than just a game, was there any facts or a bit of information that you learned about that surprised you?
Yeah, okay. I have actually two little fun facts. So, first, I want to share one that's Chicago based, since that's where I live and that's where Albert Whitman is. So, the Harlem Globetrotters, that team, it's a very famous kind of exhibition team. They do like a lot of tricks and stuff like that, but they originally started as a Black Fives team.
Oh my.
So, in Chicago, during the Black Fives era, their team was called the Savoy Big Five. They were named that after the Savoy Ballroom, which was on the south side, a little bit south of Bronzeville. And it was a famous musical venue like Ella Fitzgerald, Louis Armstrong, Billie Holiday, Duke Ellington, huge musicians played there. And the Savoy Big Five also played there when the music wasn't happening. But the Savoy Big Five basketball team split into two teams a little bit, I think in the 1930s. And the second team was called the Harlem Globetrotters. And that team originally was a regular basketball team. They played Black Fives games, and originally, yeah, that's what they were originally. And they eventually became this modern day exhibition team. So yeah, I think it was just a really cool link of like, this is really where all of these teams came from.
Yeah, because I feel like, I mean, everyone when they're a kid sees the commercials and the Harlem Globetrotters come to town. I mean, that's like an all over US thing. So that's so cool to know that they've originated as a real team.
Yeah, and in Chicago,
Even better.
Yeah. And then another fact, so there was a team in New York, a Black Fives team called the New York Renaissance, or the Wrens. And across 25 years, I had to write down this number, they won 2,588 of 3,117 games, which is a rate of 83%, which is kind of unbelievable. So, like, for example, today the Celtics and the Lakers both have a career winning rate of only 59%, and the highest in the NBA is only 61. So they had an 83% winning rate, which is just to show how dominant they were as a team, which is kind of wild.
Yeah, that's wild how big that number is. And my immediate thought is like, I wonder what that is in comparison to like the 90s Bulls. That's the
Yeah,
only
that's
other frame of
true.
reference I have of like a big team, being that successful. But it sounds like they probably even were more, their average was even higher than that, which is amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's awesome. Now, I do want to congratulate you and share the news with anybody watching that you received your first review of More Than Just a Game from Kirkus Reviews this past week. And not only was it a lovely review, but they awarded More Than Just a Game a star review. Congrats on that.
Thank you. Yes, I was so excited. I can't even be happier about it. I was nervous waiting for the first reviews to come in. And so for the first one to be so positive was just, I don't know, it feels like validation,
Yeah.
both that I've done a good job telling this history. And it also is just reassurance that more people are going to get this book in their hands. The most important thing to me is that I think this history deserves to be known, and it's so important to me. And so this felt like the first step of getting this book into the hands of readers. And I also just, yeah, I sent the review to my best friends and my family so we could all celebrate together. And it was also the day after my birthday, so it felt kind of like a birthday present. And I had a big slice of leftover pie, and I just, yeah, it really made my week perfect.
That is a perfect way to celebrate. Yeah. Because yeah, I think some people don't realize that you send off the books to be reviewed, but there's no guarantee that every book will be reviewed. So it's kind of that waiting game where you're like, well, I hope they'll review it and I hope it's a positive review. So this is, the best case scenario for sure. And also like to have your first debut picture book be that. That's such an incredible thing. So you celebrated with a big slice of cake. Was there any other way that you celebrated?
Just I talked on my mom bought me flowers, which was very sweet. And just, being able to share it with people who have been, with me as I'm going through all the steps of this book was really a great way to just, to share that moment and celebrate it.
Yeah. So, this is, like you said, I think it's really important, not only for the book to get reviewed, but because it does put more eyes on it. But like you said, a lot of people don't realize the long history of, and especially Black history of basketball, especially pre-NBA, and just how much of a culture impact it did have on so much of Black history. And like you said, that it's the hope to get it into more hands because it's one of those things where it actually kind of made me think of it. I was just watching Questlove's Summer of Soul documentary, which is about this music festival in 1969 that was in Harlem that kind of was forgotten, and they filmed it and no one really knew about it. And it's a beautiful piece of work that's saying, hey, this is an important part of Black history that really came out at a time that was super important in the culture and a turning point, and no one really knew about it in modern day because it just wasn't really written about and put out there. And I feel like More Than Just a Game is very much similar. People realize there's a history of basketball and a Black history because there's a lot of Black players, but they don't truly understand how much of an impact it made on Black history as a culture and this cultural touchstone that was basketball itself.
Sure. Yeah, that sounds like a really interesting documentary. I'll have to look it up. But yeah, like just being able to, say this didn't get what it deserved in that moment. And so now we can celebrate it.
Yeah, and I feel like a lot of picture books now, because I mean, there is a long history of history being only through a certain lens. We don't always share every side of history. So I think books like this are so important so that we understand that, there's so many different facets and different parts of all kinds of history, whether it be sports, whether it be American history, whether it be history of like STEM and STEAM fields. There's so many people that are not represented in our textbooks. And I feel like these books are really kind of getting that out there. And kind of on that point, what do you hope that people and readers, when they read your book, will take away from it? The big kind of takeaway.
Mhm. Okay. I think, yeah, I have a couple of things. I think one thing that this book one thing I hope that you'll take from this book is the idea of legacy. You know, you have a legacy for the generations that come after you, and you can recognize the legacy of those that came before you. You know, the Black Fives and all the other people in this book, they changed basketball forever. They made it what it is today. And it's one of the most popular and important and biggest sports in the US, you know, and it's all because of these people and because of what this generation did to work towards making the sport better and more inclusive and, you know, just stronger. And so whatever you decide to work for in your life, you can remember that you can leave an impact, and you can, you know, you can leave things better than you found them and work to make them better for those who will come after you. And it might really make a difference. And, you know, I think this book can also be just inspiration for excellence, you know, no matter who you are and what disadvantages you may face. And sometimes there might be, you know, things that feel insurmountable, like something like segregation that completely, you know, kept these players out of the spaces where they would be able to play, you know, but they found their own spaces, and you can do that too. And no matter what you want to do, you do have the capability to excel and, you know, strive to be that the best you can be. And I guess finally, something that we've already talked a little bit about, but just that, you know, community and joy are important parts of no matter of anything, you know, and basketball became so popular because it was part of a joyful social community event. And I just want readers to recognize that, you know, being in a community that's going to bring you joy and that's going to support you and that you can rely on and that you can contribute to, you know, that you can grow with and that are going to lift you up as they grow, you know, those are things that are important no matter where you are. And you can see that they lead to success too. So
I love that message, because I feel like, especially in history, you know, a lot of minorities, whether it be Black history, LGBTQ history, women's history, you have a lot of stories of like suffering or the bad things that happen in history, but the actual, like, when people rally together and create community and create spaces to do things that they love and excel at it, and that joy, there's not as much of that in history. So I do love that this book celebrates that. You know, there's a lot more children's books nowadays that are celebrating like the happy things in history that brought joy to people. What, and
yeah.
especially when they faced obstacles, like you said, like segregation, not having places to do the things they love, all these different things, despite all that.
Yeah, you know, this book is about the success, you know, it's about overcoming those things and just yeah. So I'm really excited for people to kind of see that firsthand with this book.
Definitely. Well, thanks so much again, Madison, for chatting with me about More Than Just a Game. If you want to show everybody the book, hold it up again.
Yes, thanks
More
for
Than Just a
having
Game.
me.
It'll come out this September from Albert Whitman. You can actually go ahead and pre-order it now, and it'll arrive to you when it gets when it actually gets fully printed and it's fully done, which will be this September. You can also find out more information if you go to albertwhitman.com and search for More Than Just a Game. And keep watching for more author chats here with AW. Thanks so much again, Madison, for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Have a great one.
You too.
Bye.